What happens when a stranger's kindness reaches you at the very moment you've lost all hope? Wyoming Territory, 1883. The wind tore down from the Bighorn Mountains, sharp with dust and the faint scent of snow. Catherine Hale stood outside the dry goods store in Sheridan, her shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders and her empty basket clutched in her hand. Inside, the shopkeeper's voice rang out hard and final. I said no credit. The words cut deeper than a knife. Catherine did not argue. She had already begged before, and humiliation left its sting longer than hunger. She only gave a small nod, chin raised as if dignity alone might shield her, and stepped off the wooden porch. Her stomach ached from going without food since yesterday. Her 7-year-old son, Micah, had eaten nothing more than half a biscuit at dawn. Her boots scuffed along the dirt street. She kept her eyes forward, refusing to let the tears forming in her eyes fall in front of the townsfolk. Sheridan was not kind to widows without money. Across the way, leaning against a post outside the livery, stood a man. His coat was worn but clean, his hat low over his eyes, boots scuffed from long trails. He had the look of someone who carried storms in silence. Yet nothing in the world seemed to shake him. His arms were crossed, but his eyes followed her openly, steady and calm. You got turned away for food. His voice was low, even. Catherine stiffened at the question. She wanted to deny it, but the truth hung heavy on her face. She gave a small nod, glancing toward her wagon. I will figure something out. The man pushed off the post and stepped closer. Come with me, he said as if it were the simplest thing in the world. I'll fill your table tonight. Her hand tightened around the basket. You don't even know me. I don't need to, he replied. You've got a child to feed. That's enough. Her gaze dropped to the dust between them. I cannot take charity. It isn't charity, he said. It's supper. Come on. Catherine lifted her eyes, then studying him. He had kind eyes, though they carried a weight of years behind them. The faint crease at the edge of his mouth told of a man who had smiled once, but maybe forgot how. He looked to be in his mid-30s, not young, but not worn to nothing either. Standing near him steadied her heart in a way she hadn't felt in years. She gave a small nod. He tipped his head slightly, then turned to where his horse was hitched to a muddy buckboard wagon. Name's Celis Whitlow, he said, lifting the reins. You can ride up front or follow behind. Catherine Hale, she answered, climbing up onto the seat. My son is back at our place. It's just outside town by the creek. Then that's where we'll go. The ride was quiet, but not heavy. The kind of silence that left space for breathing. The wagon creaked along the dirt road as the sun dipped low, painting the hills in gold. Catherine's eyes drifted to his hands on the reins, strong, weathered, steady hands of a man who had built and broken and survived. When they turned off the road and followed the creek, her small homestead came into view. A cabin patched with tarp paper, fences leaning tired, a roof that told of storms survived, but not unscathed. On the porch stood Micah, barefoot and thin, his face sharp from hunger, his eyes wide and watchful. That your boy? Celis asked. Yes, his name is Micah. He's 7, she nodded. Looks sharp, Celis said. The wagon stopped. Catherine climbed down as Micah ran into her arms. She lifted him close, feeling his ribs beneath his shirt. We have a guest, she said softly. He's going to help us tonight. Micah stared at Celis with big eyes. You got food. A small smile broke across Celis's face. I got more than that. You like rabbit stew. Micah's grin flashed like sunlight. I do. From the wagon, Celis unloaded supplies. Salt, pork, beans, potatoes, flour, and a wrapped cut of venison. Catherine's breath caught at the sight. Her voice faltered, but before she could speak, Celis simply said, let's cook. Inside the cabin, the fire caught quickly, and warmth spread through the small kitchen. Catherine kneaded dough for biscuits, while Celis chopped vegetables with practiced ease. Micah sat at the table, eyes wide with the smell of roasting meat. You cook like a ranch wife, Catherine said softly, watching his sure hands raised on a ranch. He replied, Ma died when I was 16. Learned what I had to. Your father? She asked. Gone before I can remember. His voice was even, not bitter. Any family now? He shook his head. Just me. She stirred the pot. Same here. They did not speak of her husband. She didn't offer and he didn't ask. It was enough that she stood tall with her boy beside her. That was story enough. Dinner filled the cabin with warmth and laughter Micah hadn't made in weeks. Afterwards, Celis helped clear the table, then stepped outside as Catherine tucked her son into bed. When she joined him, he was leaning against the porch rail, eyes lifted to the stars. "Thank you," she said quietly. He looked at her. "Anytime. You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to. You're kind," she whispered. He shrugged. "Don't know about that." "You are," she said firmly. "It's been a long time since anyone showed us kindness." His eyes met hers in the moonlight. "It doesn't have to be the last time." Her heart beat faster, not from fear, but from something she thought she had lost long ago. "Hope you mean that," she asked. "I do." They stood in the quiet, the boards creaking beneath their boots, the night pressing soft around them. "Will you come back tomorrow?" "I will," he answered without pause. She smiled then, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Good seus," tipped his hat. "Good night, Catherine." "Good night, Callus." He climbed into his wagon and turned toward the road, the wheels creaking as they rolled away. Yet, just before the bend, he looked back once and saw her still standing there, watching him go, waiting for him to return. The next morning came with frost painted across the window panes, a pale rose sky stretching over the hills. Catherine moved quietly, laying another log on the fire and setting oats to boil. Micah stirred under his quilt, but did not wake. She wrapped her shawl close and stepped onto the porch. The cold bit her skin, but her eyes fixed on something else. A single set of hoof prints pressed deep into the dirt lane. She studied them, her heart pulling. They trailed up from the road, then back again. Someone had come, waited, and gone. She did not touch them, only stood a long while, the way one might hold a letter too precious to open. By mid-morning she heard hooves again, slower this time, steady against the frozen ground. She wiped her hands on her apron, her heart full and steady. Celis rode in without hurry. His coat was buttoned high, collar turned against the wind. He dismounted, tying the res to the post, and his eyes found hers like a question already answered. "You found your way, all right?" she asked. "I did," he said. "Roads rougher past the creek, but the horse didn't mind." She stepped aside. "Come in if you're not in a rush." "No particular one," he said, and followed her inside, setting his hat gently near the hearth. Micah, now awake, watched from the corner, cautious but curious. "You remember Mr. Whitlow?" Catherine asked. "Yes, ma'am," Micah said politely. Cuss gave him a nod. "Morning, son. You help your mama with the chores. I carry wood, feed the hens, too." "That's good work," Celis said in an easy tone. "Cabin this size doesn't run by itself." Catherine poured hot water into a basin. "There's fence down out back. A deer broke through last week. I can take a look if you've got spare wire," Celis offered. "There's some rolled under the lean, too," she said, surprised at how natural it felt. Him standing in her kitchen. "I'll get started before the ground softens." While he worked, Catherine sat near the window, her sewing basket in her lap. She patched Mika's worn shirts, her needle flashing in and out, but her eyes wandered off into the yard. Silius moved along the broken fence line with calm focus. He did not mutter to himself or curse the frozen ground. He worked as though every nail mattered. Every board had its place. By midday, the fence stood straight again. Callus came in, brushing dirt from his boots. A scrape on his arm showed where wire had bit his skin, but he said nothing of it. Catherine handed him a tin plate with leftover biscuits and a few slices of ham. "It isn't much. It's more than enough," he said, stretching his legs near the fire. He chewed slow, watching the flames. "You've got good land here. Water runs clear. Trees give shelter." "It was my husband's," she said softly, eyes on her stitching. "We came from Kansas 5 years ago. He raised the beams himself. He passed here." She nodded once. 2 winters ago. Fever took him fast. The quiet between them grew, not empty, but heavy with meaning. "I buried my mother near Laramie," Celis said at last. She liked the wind there. Said it kept her honest. Catherine looked over, meeting his eyes. He shifted his plate in his hands. Stayed on a while, then drifted. Drove cattle north, helped build the rail grade, never stayed anywhere long. "You planning to stay now?" she asked. He held her gaze. Is there a reason I shouldn't? She set her needle aside, her breath steady. No reason I can think of. That afternoon, he rode into town. He returned before dusk with a small crate in the back of his wagon. Catherine stepped onto the porch as he lifted it down. Found the window glass, he said. Treated a pair of stirrups for it. Fellow at the smith he owed me. Besides, she touched the crate as if it might vanish. I'll keep it wrapped till spring. No sense fixing pains while the frost still bites. I brought a roll of oilcloth, too, he added. Might keep the cold from creeping in. Until then, Micah ran to the door, his cheeks red from play. I finished the kindling. There's a lot this time. You haul it yourself? Chellies asked. Yes, sir. Dragged it in a sack. Next time, twist the top and tie it off. Celis said plainly. Stops it catching. Micah blinked, then nodded quickly. Yes, sir. Catherine smiled faintly. You teach children much. Not often, Celis admitted. But I remember what I was like at his age. I would have listened better if someone had spoken plain. You speak plain, she said, her voice soft. Only way I know, he answered. That night, Catherine laid a thin stew on the table, stretched with turnip and barley, yet it was eaten with eagerness, and laughter spilled from Micah as he listened to Celis' quiet stories about chasing rabbits in deep snow and patching saddles on long rides. After supper, Catherine sat with her sewing in front of the hearth. Silas worked on an old harness, his knife slicing leather smooth, his hands steady. The silence between them was no longer the stillness of strangers. It had shifted into the comfort of belonging, the kind that didn't need filling with words. When Catherine finally rose to bank the fire, she paused beside him. I trust you, she said quietly. His eyes lifted to hers. You've got reason to, she nodded, then reached out and brushed her fingers lightly against his hand. Just once, but it was enough to change everything. Snow came heavy the next morning, falling slow and thick from a pale sky. By noon, drifts had swallowed the fence posts, and the wagon ruts disappeared beneath white silence. Catherine stood at the window, shawl drawn close, watching the world vanish into snow. Behind her, Celis split kindling near the hearth. Micah sat cross-legged, carving a stick with the small knife Celis had taught him to use. The cabin smelled of smoke and bread dough rising near the stove. For the first time in months, Catherine felt the kind of warmth that had nothing to do with fire. You always this quiet when the weather sets in? Celis asked, brushing wood dust from his hands. I listen better when the world stops shouting, she answered. He leaned his shoulder against the wall, watching her. Then you've been listening a long time. Her hands slowed as she shaped loaves. You ever think about building something again? Not just a place. A life. Celis crossed the room. His boots made no sound on the worn boards. I've thought about it more in the last few days than I have in years. What stopped you before? He looked at the frost curled like lace along the window. Never found a place worth staying for. Micah held up his carving. It's a bird now. Celis took it, turning it gently in his fingers. You gave it wings. That's done right. Catherine watched them, her heart swelling in a way that felt like healing. He's taken to you, she said softly. Celis met her eyes. I've never had cause to stay anywhere. But I see reason now, more than one. She stepped closer. The bread dough still clung to her hands, but she didn't care. There's room here, not just in the cabin, in our lives. He reached for her hand, slow and steady. I'd like to stay, not for a night, for good. Quote. Micah looked up, then bent back over his carving, silent, but listening. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. He's old enough to remember what it means when someone leaves. I won't promise him anything that won't be kept. Celis's grip tightened around her hand. Then I promise him this. I'll be here. I'll work this land with you both. No road ever looked better than this one. Her breath shook, but she didn't hide it. Then stay, she whispered. Stay and be part of this. He pulled her gently into his arms and she leaned against him, her face brushing the rough cloth of his coat. Outside, snow kept falling, erasing the world beyond their door. Inside, the quiet wasn't empty anymore. It was full of beginning. Spring came, carrying green along the creek and yellow blossoms in the meadow. Celis built a new chicken coop with Micah, teaching him to square corners and test a beam's strength. Catherine planted corn in long rows, her skirts brushing earth, while Celis walked beside her with the plow. Evenings they sat on the porch, hands folded together, watching the land breathe